Hello, I'm Marcelo, and on this tutorial we will learn loops and conditionals on UiPath. So we'll get started by a simple exercise. So basically we'll have an Excel sheet with customers' orders, and we'll want to loop through each customer order and check the status of the order as well as the age of the customer, and depending on the status, we'll want to perform different actions and check the age of the customer. For example, if the status of the order is completed and the customer's age is greater than 25, we'll write the order information to a separate Excel sheet labeled completed orders eligible. If the status is cancelled and the customer's age is not greater than 25, for example, we'll write the order information to a separate Excel sheet labeled cancelled orders ineligible. And that's it. So let's get started. So just create a new project, a new process on UiPath Studio. And the first thing to be done by the robot will be to read the data from the Excel files so we can get the customer orders. So here, let's use the read range activity from workbook, so the read range workbook activity. And now let's indicate the Excel file. So make sure you create a similar one. So we'll have the customer's orders sheet with the customer orders, and then we have to create 4 Excel sheets. So one for completed orders eligible, another for completed orders ineligible, and other two, so cancelled orders eligible and cancelled orders ineligible. So I'll indicate the file, and I'll just store the path on the variable. So let's copy. Now let's do Control key and create the variable str customer orders file. And now let's define the variable default value with the file path. Now let's indicate here the sheet name, so the sheet that has the customer's orders. So let's get the name. Let's paste it here inside double quotes. And now make sure the option add either is set to true, and let's create a variable that will store the data from the Excel sheet. So let's create a variable that will be a data table, dt underscore customers orders, and that's it. So after reading the customer's orders Excel sheet, we'll loop through the data table so we can process each data table row, each customer orders. So to loop through the data table, we'll use the for each row in data table activity. And here we can see it. And what this activity does, it creates a loop for each row of the data table that we indicate. So let's drag this activity after the read range activity. And so we have to indicate the data table to loop through. So let's indicate the one that we have created here. And now inside of this activity, we'll use the activities to process each customer order. So just to see how it works in a practical way, let's drag the log message activity inside of the for each row data table. Let's set the log level to info, and on message, let's write the customer name. So here, let's open double quotes. And let's here enter processing customer. And now here, let's get the customer name that is stored on the row, on the column customer name. So how we can do it? Let's add here a plus, and now let's call the row. Let's open parentheses, and inside of the parentheses, let's open double quotes. And now let's enter inside of the double quotes the column name related to the customer names. And by this way, we'll get the customer name from the row. And then in the end, let's add a dot to string. So let's see what will happen. So let's execute our process. So I got an error because I have the Excel file open. So let's close it. And I will retry. And as you can see, basically we have a log message for each customer order, and for each customer order we can see the customer name. So we can notice that this activity was executed for each row that we have on our Excel file. So now that we are able to process each customer order, let's set up our first validation, that will be to check the order status. And we have some ways that we could use to do it. The one that we'll use is by using the switch activity. So here on activities, let's search for switch. And let's drag it after the log message inside of the for each row in data table activity. And now how works this activity? Basically, we define here the cases that we'll handle. So let's here click on add new case, and here let's enter completed. That's one of the cases that we have when the order status is completed. And if it appears this error is completely normal, that's because the type argument by default is to integer, and here we are using a string. So to fix this, let's just delete. And now here on the properties, let's set the type argument to string. So now we can add a new case, and let's add completed. And so no error. So we have here our first case. The other one will be the canceled status. So let's enter here. Now that we have these cases defined, completed and canceled, if the expression that we defined here matches one of these cases, so if the result of the expression is completed or canceled, basically the robot will enter the case that it matches. And if it happens the case that the expression, the result of the expression doesn't match the completed or canceled case, the robot will enter on the default case. Now, taking account that we have only two cases to take in account, we could do this by using the if activity, the if conditional, but I want to show also the switch because we will use also the if later on this tutorial. So now let's here define our expression. So our expression will have to guess the value, so the status of the customer order. So to get it, first let's call the current row that represents the row that it's being iterated from the data table. And now let's indicate here the column name that it's related to the order status. So here we can see the column name is status. So let's copy and let's paste. And then let's add here dot to string. So for example, when the robot processes the first customer order, it will be completed. So the result of the expression will be completed, and so it will enter on the completed case. So in the case that we have here, the pending one, as we don't have the pending case, the robot will enter on the default case. So let's now set up each case, so the completed and the canceled. So knowing the order status, we'll want to check if the customer age is greater than 25. If it's greater than 25, we'll write the order information on the completed orders eligible if it's completed status. If it's canceled status and the customer age is greater than 25, we'll write the customer order canceled orders eligible Excel sheet. So to create a condition to validate if the customer age is greater than 25, let's use the if activity. Let's drag this one inside of the completed case. And so if the customer age is greater than 25, so just to be more clear, I'm changing here the display name of the activity. So if it's greater than 25, we'll write the order information on the eligible Excel sheet. If not, we'll write the order information on the ineligible Excel sheet. So let's create here the condition. So first we have to get the customer's age. So first let's take the row, open parentheses, open double quotes, and let's indicate the column that has the age. So here we can see it, the name age. And now we have to convert the value that we'll get, the number, to integer, so then we can do a comparison with other number. In this case, with the number 25, to check if it's greater than 25. So let's here add cint, open parentheses, and then close parentheses after current row age. So after getting the customer's age. And now that we are converting the value that we'll get to integer, we can check if it's greater than 25. And so here we have our conditions. So if the customer's age is greater than 25, we'll write the order on the eligible Excel sheet. If not, we'll write it on the ineligible Excel sheet. So we could write directly on Excel from here, or we can first create a data table, one for each case, so one for the completed eligible, another for the completed orders ineligible, another for the canceled orders eligible, and another for the canceled orders ineligible. And that's the way that we'll do on this case. So let's just build here 4 data tables. So let's use the build data table activity. And now let's set up here the columns, so it will be the same as we have here. So first we'll have the customer ID, then we'll have the customer name, and it will be a value of type string. Then we'll have the age, then we'll have the order ID, then we'll have the order date, then we'll have the order amount, and now important, the last one, the status column. So let's just delete this row. So the data table will be empty. Let's click on OK. And now let's create the data table for the completed eligible orders. So let's create the data table variable dt underscore completed eligible orders. And now we just have to replicate, so let's copy this build data table activity and paste it 3 times. So here we have the DT completed eligible orders. So now let's create the DT completed ineligible orders. So let's here just change the name and create a new data table. Let's press enter. So now we have the completed ineligible and completed ineligible. So now let's create for the cancelled ones. So let's create here dt underscore cancelled eligible orders. And now last one for the ineligible ones. And now this one for dt underscore cancelled ineligible orders. And that's it. So let's just place these will data tail activities inside of the sequence to be more cleaner. I'll just rename the sequence to will data tables. So now that we have our data tables, so if it's the customer age greater than 25 and the order status is completed, we'll add a row to the data table dt completed eligible orders. So let's use the add data row activity. So here let's indicate the data table where we want to add a row. So it will be the dt completed eligible orders. And now let's here define the row content. So first we must open curly brackets. And now let's pass the content in order. So first we must pass the order ID, the customer ID. So current row, open parentheses, double quotes, and now here the column name for the customer ID. Then let's add a dot to string. And then we have the customer name. We can just have to change here the column name. Then let's just verify we have the age. And then we have the order ID, order date, order amount, and finally status. And that's it. And then we can just copy this activity and paste on the else side. So when the age is not greater than 25, and just change here the data table to add the row. So it will be the dt underscore cancelled, completed ineligible orders. So basically we just have to do the same on the cancelled case. So we can copy our condition, open the cancelled case, paste the condition, and now we just have to change the data tables to right. So if the age is greater than 25, we will write the row on the cancelled eligible orders. If the age is not greater than 25, we'll write it on the cancelled ineligible orders. And that's it. So before writing the data tables on the Excel file, here on the default, let's just add a log message, so just to see how it works then. And here, and let's just enter the message, this order will not be processed, status, and let's just write the order status. So after doing this for each customer order, let's write our data tables on the Excel file. So to write, let's use the write range activity. So let's drag it. So first we have to indicate the workbook path. So we have it on our variable str customers orders file. Then we have to indicate the sheet name. So let's indicate the first one, completed orders eligible. Then the starting cell. So as I have here on the first row the column names, I'll set the starting cell to right on the second row. So here on A2. So here let's enter cell A2 and the data table DT underscore completed eligible orders. And then we will have to replicate the right range for each data table to right, but we can avoid this. So just by using only one right range and basically place this right range inside of a loop that loops through each Excel sheet name that we have to process to write on this case. So let's do this on a practical way, will be easier to understand. So let's create here an array on variables. Let's create an array R customers orders sheets, and now let's set the variable type to array of strings. So that means that this variable can store more than one value of type string. And now let's create here, let's define the default value of this variable. So it will be new string. And now then open parentheses, and then let's open curly braces. And inside of the curly braces, let's enter the Excel sheets that we have to write. So first one, we have it here, the completed orders eligible. Then let's add a comma and write the next one. So it's the completed orders ineligible. Then we have the cancelled orders eligible. And here I deleted a comma, let's add it. And then in last we have the cancelled orders ineligible. And that's it. So make sure you separate each Excel sheet name by the comma and that you place the Excel sheet name inside double quotes. So we have these Excel sheet names stored on this array of string. So now what we'll do, let's use the for each activity, which creates a loop for each element of a variable. So for each value of an array, of a collection, of a dictionary, and so on. So let's drag it after the for each in data table. And here let's indicate what we want to loop through. So we want to loop through the array of string that we have created. And we could notice that the type of argument was automatically changed to string. And why? Because here we are processing an array of strings. So that means that the values that we will iterate here are of type string. So here now, inside of the for each activity, let's drag the right range activity. And now, instead of indicating directly on the activity, the Excel sheet name to write, let's take what's on the current item, so the Excel sheet name that it's being iterated. So we can also, just to be more clear, change here to current sheet name. And now let's replace here. And now we have to find a way to dynamically set the data table to write. So when it's the complete illegible, we want to write the data table completely illegible. But if it's been iterated, the Excel sheet name completed orders ineligible, we want to write the appropriate data table. So how we can handle this case? So we'll create a data set. So a data set, it's a collection of tables, and on this data set we'll have our tables, and so our data tables will have a name, and so we'll find the name of our data tables. like the ones that we have for the Excel sheets. So let's just use here a sequence, and let's rename it to add data tables to dataset. And first, let's create the dataset. So here, let's create dataset underscore customers orders. And now here, let's browse for types and enter dataset. And let's select it. Let's initiate it here by using new system.data.dataset. So now here on this sequence, let's add the data tables to the dataset. So maybe we are overcomplicating a bit, but I really wanted to show here the use of the for each, that it's another way to create loops as we did with the for each row in data table, that it's used to create loops for each row of a data table. So first let's use an assign here, and let's define the table name of each data table. So let's get started by the first data table. So let's define its name. So let's call for the data table completed eligible orders. And now let's add here a dot. And then let's enter table name. And now here, let's set the table name for this data table. So for this one, let's copy the name of the Excel sheet for this case. So it's the completed orders eligible. So let's paste here inside double quotes. And let's do the same for the other one. So let's here now extract, get the name of the next Excel sheet. Let's here replace, and also replace the data table. So it will be here the DT completed ineligible orders. Now for this one will be the cancelled eligible. And now here we just have changed the completed to cancelled. And now here last one, so it's ineligible instead of eligible. And let's replace also the data table. And that's it. So now to add our data tables to the dataset, let's use the invoke method activity. We have to use invoke method activity for each data table. So here target object will be our dataset, and then we have to add tables. Then the method name will be head to add the data table to our dataset. Now here parameters, let's here pass our data table. So first will be the DT completed eligible orders, and now we can just copy this activity and paste it 3 times. So here let's just change now the data table to right. So DT completed ineligible. Then this one will be the DT cancelled eligible. And last one, the cancelled ineligible orders. So after this, our dataset will have the data tables. So now here on the right range, we can just take our dataset. So we have to call our dataset, and seems that it isn't accessible from here. So let's just click on this sequence where we have created our dataset. Maybe it's the scope of our dataset, and it is. So here let's increase the scope. And now let's try again. So we got our data set. Now let's add dot tables, open parentheses, and let's call here the current sheet name. So by this way we'll target the table that has the sheet name that it's being created. So the sheet that will be wrote on the Excel file. And that's it. So now let's see how it's running our process. So I'll close the Excel file. We can see that it's empty. Only the customer's orders as data, as we can see. So let's just run our process. So it already finished. Let's open the Excel. So let's check if it was wrote on Excel sheets the customer's orders. So completed orders eligible. Here we can see two customer orders that has the age greater than 25 and the states completed, so it's right. Completed orders ineligible. So we can see that this one states completed but age it's below, so it's not greater than 25, so it's right also. Then cancelled orders eligible. Here we can see status cancelled and age greater than 25. It's right. And then this one cancelled orders ineligible. So status cancelled and age is not greater than 25. So we can see that our process has run as expected. And then here on the output we can also see that when the order status was pending, because we don't handle this case, it goes through the default case. So that's our first exercise. So here we can see that we have learned how to use the for each row data table loop, how to use the switch, how to use the if conditional, and also how to use the for each loop. So I have just created another workflow, and now on this workflow we'll learn only loops. So we'll create a process that basically will trigger an input dialog that will allow the user to choose a number, and while the chosen number is not greater than 10, the input dialog will appear. And when the user chooses a number greater than 10, will stop appearing the input dialog and will appear a message box saying number accepted. So we'll use two approaches, the first one and then the second one that will be an improved way. So first, let's use here the input dialog activity. And here, let's define dialog title, choose a number. And so here input type will be multiple choice. And here let's paste the input options. So just open double quotes and put each number until 12 separated by semicolon. So now let's create a variable to store the value entered, the chosen value, str choose number. And now let's create a loop, a while loop. And so basically this loop executes a loop while the condition that we define here is true. So here let's call our variable that stores the chosen number. And so we want to compare it to check if it's not greater than 10. And if it isn't, we will stay on the loop, on this activity, and execute what's inside of the body. So first we have to convert the value to integer so we can compare it to numbers. So let's use the chint. And now let's add if the number is below or equal to 10. So if this is true, this expression, this condition, we will stay on the loop and execute what's on the body. So when the chosen number is below than 10, we will trigger the input dialog again. And then if the chosen number is above 10, it's greater than 10, we will display a message box with the message, with the text number accepted. So let's see how it works. So let's run our automation, our process. So let's choose a number. So let's choose the one below than 10, not greater than 10. And here we can see that still appears the pop-up because it's not greater than 10. So let's choose again, for example, 1, and we stay on the loop. But if we choose now 1 greater than 10, will appear the message box number accepted. So we see how we can use the while loop. But on this case, there is a better loop that we could use, and that's the do while loop. So let's call here the do while. Let's enter do while and let's drag it. And so basically, the only difference between the do while and the while loops is that the do while executes first the activities inside of it and then checks if the condition is true or false. So that means that it will always execute at least one time what's on the body, while the while loop may not execute what's inside of it if the condition is false. So on our case, let's adapt to use the do while so we can notice the difference. So let's drag the input dialog. And now let's use the condition that we have here. And so we can see the difference. So basically before we had to have an input dialog first and then use the while activity to check if the chosen number was greater than 10. And if it wasn't, we would trigger again the input dialog. But now, as we are using the do while activity and we know that the activities contained are always executed at least one time, we can use only here one time the input dialog activity and so have the same behavior that we had before. So let's run what we have here. So here, let's choose a number. And so it's below than 10, so it will keep appearing the input dialog. So now let's choose 12, for example. Number accepted and the process ends. And that's it for this tutorial. If you liked it, please smash the like button and now subscribe to the channel and enable notifications bell so you get notified on each tutorial that is launched on the channel.